Star Wars 7x7 episode 2783. The I love you, I know lines of dialogue are probably some of the most iconic, not just in Star Wars history, but in cinematic history as well. And I think it's more or less common knowledge that the I know was improvised, but that's not really accurate. And so I thought on today's show we would talk about what the lines were supposed to be and how the I know came about, and also a little bit of fun with something I did with TikTok about this. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, let's first talk about what the lines of dialogue were actually supposed to be for that scene, because Leia is supposed to say, I love you, but she actually has a little bit more in her dialogue than that. She goes on to say, I couldn't tell you before, but it's true. And Han's initial scripted response is, just remember that, 'cause I'll be back. Yes, he actually says, I'll be back. Well, this would have been in 1979, I guess, so 5 years before Arnold Schwarzenegger would deliver that line so famously in The Terminator. So how did we get from I love you, I couldn't tell you before, but it's true, and just remember that because I'll be back, to I love you and I know? Well, the story is told in Alan Arnold's Journal of the Making of The Empire Strikes Back called Once Upon a Galaxy. I would say that as far as things that I own that are Star Wars, like this is probably one of my most treasured possessions. It is just amazing that I managed to have one of these, and my version of it has like all sorts of like notes and it'll post-it things flagging different pages and whatnot. And so on the entry for June 21st of 1979, Alan Arnold is writing about the fact that they're about to film the scene in the carbon freezing chamber, and he says this. He says, another element the director must weave into this sacrificial scene is the emotionally tense relationship between Han and the princess. It has been a cat and mouse game up to now, but this scene of Han's departure into the void must surely be the moment of truth for both of them and for the audience. And so it just so happens that Alan Arnold has a cordless microphone on Irvin Kershner, so he's walking around with a mic, and Alan Arnold is following him around with an antenna and a receiver and recording everything Kershner is saying to people. And one of the people with whom he is having a conversation is Harrison Ford, and they're talking about the blocking of the scene, about how Han is moving through the carbon freezing chamber and how he's encountering people and delivering the lines of dialogue that he has to deliver and that sort of thing. And so this is the bit of conversation that Alan Arnold captures. Harrison Ford says, I think I should be manacled, talking about, of course, him being in handcuffs or otherwise restrained during the scene. And he goes on to say, it won't stop the love scene. I mean, I don't have to put my arms around Leia to kiss her. I can't see how they would indulge in more than a straight kiss in such circumstances. It has to be rough and brisk and over with. And Kershner agrees with him and says, yeah, absolutely, I don't intend to mess around. And Harrison Ford continues on and says, as I pass her, I think Leia ought to say very simply, I love you. So already Harrison Ford is there proposing a change to Leia's dialogue. And Kershner, there's a little parenthetical about him trying it out and saying, I love you. And then he tells Harrison Ford, and you say, just remember that, Leia, because I'll be back. You've got to say, I'll be back. You must, in italics here. It's almost contractual. And at that, Harrison Ford says, if she says, I love you, and I say, I know, that's beautiful and acceptable and funny. And Kershner replies, right. You know what? I may keep Vader out of this until the end. When all this stuff is over, Vader walks right in and all he says is put him in the carbon freezing chamber. So there you go. That is the genesis of the change to the iconic I love you, I know, that we all know and love. And, you know, the whole idea about improv, that tells you that they were trying out these different things while they were filming, and, you know, they may well have done, but this line wasn't really improv. It was worked out in advance before they actually got to filming the scene in the first place. All right, so about the fun TikTok thing, I do at least 2 videos a day over on TikTok, and if you're not following the podcast on TikTok and you're on TikTok, then hey, follow the podcast on TikTok. It's SW7X7 over there. And so I do 2 videos a day there at least. One of them is a This Day in Star Wars History. video, and the other is a Star Wars trivia question video. And recently, one of the ones I pulled out of the card deck that I pulled was, what does Han Solo say to Princess Leia when she says, "I love you" in The Empire Strikes Back? And I mean, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to know the answer to this one. I think it's pretty much in the collective consciousness by now. But what I did was I gave people the other answers just for amusement's sake, because yes, this was multiple choice. The other choices were, "I love you too," and "Will you marry me?" and finally she admits it. And I said on TikTok, let me hear what your own responses would be for this situation. Improv your own responses. And there's kind of a mix of rejection and acceptance and questioning of these things, along with some acknowledgments, like there's a ditto as one response, and another is, "I love you too, you scruffy looking nerf herder," throwing that line right back at her. And other responses that I really enjoyed are at that kind of meta level. It's about the thing that it's about. So one person's response suggested to the "I love you" is, "I have a bad feeling about this," and another one's response was, "Tell everyone I shot first." There's one that was, "Are you sure because you kissed Luke?" And there's ones that build off of that in uncomfortable ways, like, "Ew, but you kissed your brother," that sort of thing. There were a couple of Chewbacca related ones where someone's response was, "Are you talking to me or Chewie?" And there was another one which I thought was well phrased, "You just want me for my Wookiee." I thought that was kind of well done. Then there's a range of sort of rejection to kind of engagement to the question, with things like, "Sorry, you're not my type," or "That's nice, thanks," or "Let's get to know each other a little better," or "Why?" Like somebody just put "why" with a question mark as his response. Or a couple of folks who said "sure you do" as a response. Another one saying, "Don't you think we're going a little too fast here?" And also a "let's get to know each other better" one. I think in the other one that was one of my favorites was that Princess Leia says, "I love you," and Han says, "Are you dying? Am I dying?" So yeah, that was silly and fun, and I really appreciate everybody who took the time to comment on that one with their own responses. And yeah, that's, I think, where we're going to leave things for the podcast today. So now you know the secret history of the changes that created the "I love you, I know" lines, and a little silliness about that too. And that's going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.